abduct social media influencers in Sana'a over criticizing the rebels' economic policies. An international rights group accuses Houthis of using prisoners for political gains. A recent report says natural disasters have increased displacement rates in Yemen. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. Houthis have launched an abduction campaign against key social media influencers in Sana'a over videos by those activists who criticized the deteriorating economic situation and the rebels' looting of public and private properties. This report has more details.
The violations of the Houthis against Yemenis continues. One of the recent violations is the Houthi abuses against civil society activists in the capital Sana'a. Houthis have kidnapped 3 widely known Yemeni YouTubers as the militia tightens its grip on online influencers who expose its leaders' flaws. It was reported that the YouTubers Mustafa Al-Mumari, Hamoud Al-Misbahi, and Ahmed Allau got abducted by the Houthis for their posts on social media for supporting YouTuber Ahmed Hajar, who got seized 10 days ago also by Houthis. The social media posts included criticism on the Houthis' corruption and the widespread famine in the country. Al-Mumari is a well-known social media figure in Yemen with over 2 million YouTube subscribers and tens of thousands of Facebook fans. He had previously appeared in a video in which he condemned the Houthis for kidnapping his friend Hajar. Yemeni officials and analysts believe the Houthis' campaign against social media influencers is intended to silence prominent figures who have the ability to reach millions of Yemenis. The Minister of Information in Yemen, Muammar al-Iryani, said that the Houthis are fearing an uprising against their sectarian rule, inability to pay salaries, and failure to provide services. He also criticized the Houthis for being the main reason for poverty and starvation against Yemenis in areas under their control, which led to the destruction of everything in Yemen following the Iranian agenda. Houthi rebels took control of the capital Sana'a in 2014, resulting in a civil war. Now Yemenis are suffering from poverty and starvation, in addition to continuous violations committed by the Houthis against Yemenis.
The Watchdog International Rights Organization has accused the Houthis of using the prisoners to achieve more political gains. This followed the increasing torture and deaths of some detainees in the Houthi jails due to subjecting them to extreme torture. This report has more details.
Amatu Salam al-Hajj, the chairman of the Yemeni Abductees Mothers Association, has accused the Houthi rebels of exploiting the captives and abductees situation as a political bargaining tool, demanding the unconditional release of all detainees. On New Year's Eve, the chairman stated that we are approaching 2023, and our children are still suffering in Houthi prisons, and some of them have spent more than 7 years in captivity. She said the detainees exchange file is still hanging between the various parties and the UN Envoy's office, and every now and then, the Houthis and the government blame each other for the delay, while the victims, their families and mothers suffer immensely. Al-Hajj urged for the quick release of all civilians since their goal was purely humanitarian and they did not carry weapons or engage in combat. The appeal comes just days after the Yemeni government and the Houthis spat allegations about who was impeding the prisoner exchange under the Amman Arrangement and the Stockholm Agreement, which was signed in late 2018. Abdul Qadir al-Murtada, the leader of the Houthi Prisoners Committee, previously accused the Yemeni government and Saudi Arabia of purposefully impeding the prisoner swap accord. The Houthi claims were met with a response from the Yemeni administration, who declared that they were prepared to close the file on detainees and kidnapped people. One of the unresolved disputes between the government and the Houthis is the question of captives and abductees. On November 6, 2022, the Specialized Criminal Appeals Court Division in the capital Sana'a decided to compel the public prosecution to bring 4 detained journalists back to a court for a hearing on December 4, 2022. They were not taken to court, however, and the hearing was postponed until January 22, 2023. Reliable local sources verified that the refusal to send the journalists back to court is proof that they have been tortured and that the authorities are afraid that they would testify about it in court.
The Presidential Council held a meeting to discuss developments in the local situation, executive plans and policies to alleviate the suffering of citizens. The meeting also discussed ways of strengthening unity and efforts to restore state institutions and end the healthy coup. The army forces bombed Houthi militia positions west of Taiz, killing a Houthi soldier and wounding 2 others. The center indicated that the army forces thwarted an infiltration attempt by the Houthi militia in Aqabat Manif, east of the city. One person was killed and 3 others were wounded due to an explosive device in Abyan Governorate. During the past months, more than 160 people, most of them soldiers, were killed and injured in explosive devices and military confrontations against Al-Qaeda members. A person was killed when a Houthi landmine exploded in the Tuhaita district south of Hodeidah. Local sources said that the mine exploded while the citizen was grazing sheep, which led to his immediate death. The Houthi militia refuses to hand over the mine maps to enable further removal. Displaced people in Yemen continue to suffer, especially during winter. A recent report showed that natural disasters have increased the rate of displacement with 34%. This report gives more details.
A majority of Yemen's internally displaced wish to return to their areas of origin, contrarily to previous data from last year's beginning, according to the recent data by the International Organization for Migration (IOM) and the United Nations Population Fund (UNFPA). In the second half of 2022, 41% of the families interviewed plan to remain in their current displacement sites, despite widespread concerns about a lack of essential services, while 20% had yet to decide. The plans to stay in the sites are often linked to security concerns. Some families reported plans to return compared to some others. Ma'rib, Hodeidah and Taiz recorded the highest levels of new displacement, showing that around 41% of all respondent households plan to stay in their current locations at the assessment time. The families most commonly cited insecurity in places of origin, followed by concerns about livelihood opportunities. As a secondary reason for staying, the questionnaire revealed that livelihood concern ranked highest on the list, followed by worries about shelter in places of origin and security concerns. In response to requests to identify 3 potential risks while staying in displacement sites, almost all households cited a lack of essential services such as food, health, water, and education. Some families cited insecurity as a risk in their current locations. Only very few reported a risk of hostility from host communities outside the IDP sites. In addition, families indicated the need for security in IDP sites. More than 2/3 of respondents who intended to stay reported having plans to make a living in their current displacement sites in agriculture, construction, and other daily work activities. The 6 months truce led to a decreased fighting, which led to a drop in the displacement rate over the past year, but warns that natural disasters, such as severe seasonal floods and droughts, disrupted livelihood, rescue missions, and services. During 2022, the UN response mechanism led by the Population Fund stated that 447,000 individuals were assisted. Among the newly displaced, some were displaced due to the conflict, while others were displaced due to the heavy rains and floods. IOM's displacement tracking matrix assessed current intentions for the return of IDPs in 20 IDP sites in Aden. New displacements to and within Aden were relatively uncommon in 2022, constituting 2% of all registered new removals. Most families arrived from Hodeidah and some arrived from Taiz, which indicated that most migrated families from West Coast came to Aden. Leaving areas of origin due to compelling circumstances force people to encounter many challenges that they may not be capable to handle or adapt, unless with an extended hand that may help them to survive. Peace and stability would be the solution to many of those displaced families.
Ministry of Social Affairs in Aden has directed civil associations and institutions not to open bank accounts in banks that are not subject to the supervision of the Central Bank of Aden. The directive called on these institutions and associations to quickly liquidate and close any balances or accounts outside the banks approved in the circular. The Supreme Economic Council approved the package of financial and monetary measures. The policies aimed at enhancing revenues, ensuring their access to government accounts, and rationalizing expenditures. Coming next. Largest energy companies change hands in Yemen due to Houthi attacks on key ports.
ننشر ندي ماء من الغل والغلط بعيد، كنا ندي بالدواب نعبي ماء وترجعنا. ننزل الساعة 5 رجعنا الساعة 9.
ما يجي لنا ظهر لأن زحمة ما حد يخلي الجهل يغرق وإحنا تعبنا زيادة.
وكنت أحس صدري يوجعني وعز قلبك ركبي يوجعيني.
كنا ما نستخدم حتى نغسل أولادنا إلا يعني بأيام معدودة.
كنت أغيب على المدرسة لأن كنت أروح الديمة.
حتى وإن كان يجي الأمطار تروح هدر لأنه ما في معي خزانة.
الوقت نشتري ب30,000 هي معها استهلاك ما يغلقش معها الشهر.
لا تروح تطلب الله ولا أي حاجة، عاملة كل شغلك على الماء.
Welcome back. The Houthi militia rejected a contract signed by the Yemeni government with a UAE company to establish a new seaport in Al-Mahra. According to the militia, the purpose of the contract is to exploit the Kushna fish port, accusing the government of seeking to loot mineral resources. A global energy company took over oil production facilities in Yemen from another international company. Zenith Netherlands announced that it has agreed to acquire the energy assets of Vienna-based OMV in a deal worth more than $21.6 million. The deal is still awaiting approval from authorities in Yemen and Austria.
A global energy company acquired oil-producing facilities in war-torn Yemen from another international firm. The move comes as the Houthi rebels have repeatedly targeted terminals and tankers in efforts to stop their rivals from exporting oil. The deal is still pending the approval of authorities in Yemen and Austria. There was no immediate comment from Yemen's internationally recognized government. The field produced an average of 6,000 barrels per day as of January 2022 because of a lack of drilling activities. That amount was down from around 15,000 barrels per day before Yemen's civil war. The Austrian company OMV also sold its shares into 2 smaller fields in central Yemen, along with an estimated of 571 billion cubic feet of recoverable gas. It announced in June that it would sell its assets in the country as part of plans to downgrade its oil activities. The firm reported that its oil and gas production in Yemen decreased by 15% to 1.1 million barrels in 2021. At the height of a Houthi attack on the energy-rich central province of Ma'rib. Since the warring parties failed to renew a truce, the rebels have repeatedly attacked oil terminals and energy firms working in the country in an attempt to prevent oil exportation by the internationally recognized government. The rebels launched a drone attack targeting an oil tanker of an oil terminal operated by the government. They targeted another oil vessel with an explosive drone south of the country. Yemen, the Arab world's poorest country, has reserves of only 3 billion barrels of oil and 17 trillion cubic feet of gas, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration.
Fishing was Yemen's second largest economic sector after oil. The industry provided a livelihood for over 2.5 million Yemenis who lived along the Red Sea coast. During war, such industry has shrunk dramatically due to the ongoing conflict. The following report has more details.
The Yemeni coasts are exposed to excessive pressure on the fishing sector, including indiscriminate depletion of fish wealth by foreign and local companies, especially in Al-Mahra governorate in the east of the country, amid exploitation of the state of division and continuous conflict that the country has been witnessing for nearly 8 years, while fishermen with limited resources suffer from difficulties. The growth of overfishing throughout the coasts of Yemen has led to a decline in the revenues of one of the most important economic activities in the country, while the local authorities in some areas tend to set up a mechanism to regulate fishing, in a step that activists in the fishing sector see as coming too late but necessary to preserve the country's wealth, as they witnessed a significant expansion of overfishing and random dredging of fish, especially commercial species. The officials added that there is a need for all concerned parties to unite and integrate, which leads to activating the rule of marine control and preventing the use of legally prohibited means in the fishing sector, as well as implementing effective programs to help fishermen and working to complete services and development projects that contribute to infrastructure development and fisheries regulation. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, most of the fishery facilities and infrastructure in Yemen are either in poor condition or have been suspended due to the conflict, which has affected the livelihoods of more than 500,000 people living in the coastal areas and relying on the sea to provide them with food and money for their families. Fishing was once Yemen's second largest economic sector after oil, producing about 400,000 tons of seafood annually, according to government reports. Coastal communities in Yemen have suffered greatly in the ongoing bloody conflict. Fishing boats, ports, and processing sites have been destroyed or damaged, and many fishermen have lost their lives. In addition, there are restrictions on accessing certain fishing zones imposed by security forces and in some cases local authorities. This is an urgent call for all concerned bodies to preserve Yemen's fishing wealth and help fishermen in gaining back their livelihoods.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. How to subduct social media influencers in Sana'a over criticizing the rebels' economic policies. This is the end of the news. It was Rushan Fouad. See you soon.